And we'll start off with the meetings of the previous meeting, le procès-verbal de la réunion précédente. Est-ce que tout est correct?
Is everything fine with the minutes of the previous meeting? Questions, comments? I will ask a favor. Can we skip from 1 to 3? Mr. Stanton and his team are here. Just in case number 2 would take a little bit more time, we'd like to skip to number 3. We know that he has a very important thing to do at noon. Do we have a consensus? No one's against? Great.
TVP Working Group recommendations. We'll go to Mr. Stanton, the chair of the working group on the LTVP. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, everyone, colleagues. As you'll know, I'm reporting here today as chair of the Long-Term Vision Plan Working Group. I'm joined here today again by officials that are on this project on a daily basis. Susan Kulba with the Digital Services and Real Property section here at Parliament, as well Rob Wright and Jennifer Garrett from PSPC. Just to update you essentially on two main points that arose out of our meeting of the 5th of February. The first is to share some costing information that has been shared to the working group from PSPC. And secondly, to put in front of you our recommendation for a concept design option for the main entry to the Parliament Welcome Centre. So you will see before we go to those, I just want to give you a few little photos here of a presentation of the progress of construction, which continues to move along well and remains on track with respect to all of the project plans. So first item, PSPC presented their approach to establishing a full costing for the Centre Block project. They outlined the key project decisions that have been made so far that have impacted the overall cost, including preserving the existing size or footprint of the House of Commons, for example, the size of the Parliament Welcome Centre, and things like the proposed use of the existing light courts and light wells. To build on this, they went on further to itemize some of the remaining decisions that will further add to the accuracy and overall costing of the project. To give you an idea of where the project is currently in terms of expenditures relative to budget, the initial allocation for Centre Block was $655 million. This was for the 5-year period, fiscal 2017-18, through until fiscal 2021-22. To date, $150 million of that 655 has been spent, and that has been used to enable the design and construction activities, including interior demolition work and the abatement of hazardous materials. The second part of that budget relating to the Parliament Welcome Centre, an initial budget was allocated of $106 million, again for the same 5-year period, 2017-18 through to 2021-22, will be next fiscal year. And to date, out of that 106, $35 million has been spent, and that's been used essentially to complete all of the design elements as well as to begin the excavation activities. I think just a final note on the cost side of this equation, just to take note of, is that decisions have been taken that have helped to put some precision around these, and I do point to a decision, first of all, early on when, as an example, the House of Commons chamber was established as a decision not to make it any bigger than it currently is, to keep the existing footprint. That essentially avoided a cost of an extra $100 million had we chosen to expand it. Secondly, on the Parliament Welcome Centre, you will recall that we opted for the medium-size approach to the Welcome Centre, and that was $120 million less than had we gone for the larger Welcome Centre. Les responsables de SPAC resteront en communication avec.
The group will continue to engage with parliamentary partners to finalize the key remaining decisions. And Turner and Townsend will complete the construction cost estimates and benchmarking reports in the spring of this year. At that point, we will have more information to share with the board. The working group also received an update from Centris, the architectural firm for CP, on the work they have been doing since the fall on refining the entry strategy to the Parliament Welcome Centre. As you will recall, an independent design review panel has been retained to provide advice during the development of this important aspect of the project. The IDRP is a panel of distinguished design professionals with expertise in the issues relevant to this project. The panel was convened last fall by PSPC with the support of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada to provide outside assessment of the main entry scheme. The main entry and its location are extremely sensitive from a heritage perspective, as well as the potential impact to Parliament's front lawn. Having taken these concerns and the IDRP's suggestion into account, Centris took us through a range of options they'd considered for this central entrance. Then, they presented the preferred option, which received the unanimous support of the IDRP panel. Of this preferred option, the panel noted its simplicity, elegance, and how it minimized impacts to the heritage features in proximity to it.
Option locates an entrance on either side of the central stair. I think you'll see before you there on slide 4 a plan view of just what we mean, with an added pathway on each side departing from the central walkway as you approach the central stairs, each leading directly to each new entrance. The geometry of the paths themselves is drawn from the existing geometry. We just go back to that slide 4 there, Susan. Yeah. You'll see there in this view as the pathways, the symmetry or the geometry, if you will, of the paths on either side of the walkway very much mirror the approach taken by the Pearson-designed entrances under the Peace Tower. Some advantages of this scheme are, and you can go to those next slides now if you wish, some of the advantages of these entrances are the fact that it's visible. Each of them will be visible from the central walkway, so it's an intuitive and easily understood pathway for visitors who have never been to the hill before. It's a gentle slope towards the new entrances, so these will be ramps that help improve accessibility and will not require handrails. And thirdly, the entrance design is simple and is accomplished with as little intervention into the heritage features and materials as possible. Minimal impact to the use of the lawn that is enjoyed for so many activities throughout the year. We as a working group had the opportunity to ask questions and a discussion with the IDRP to understand and explore the design that they had presented. And we are satisfied and believe that the proposed option responds to any concerns as to how the entrance might interfere with or encroach upon the front lawn, and that it meets the operational requirements of the Parliament Welcome Centre. Based on the merits of the proposed option, the working group recommends that the board endorse this design option for the central entry to the Welcome Centre. I'll welcome any questions or suggestions the board may have on those concept options. Et maintenant, nos prochaines étapes consisteront à examiner.
The next steps for the working group will be to study the remaining key areas for decision as outlined by PSPC for establishing the baseline cost. Upon study of each of those key elements, we will return to the board with recommendations and for direction. Also, the working group will be meeting with our Senate counterparts in the next few weeks for discussions on the proposed CB East Lightwell infill, and we will report back to the board on those discussions.
Intentions, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Est-ce qu'il y a des questions ou des commentaires pour Monsieur?
Questions or comments for Mr. Stanton?
Not seeing any. I want to thank Mr. Stanton and your team for coming out today and filling us in on where we're at.
That's great.
Looks very
Thank
good.
you very
Thank
much.
you for all your hard work.
And we'd be.
Okay. And do we have agreement of everyone to proceed? Very good. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Now we'll go back to item number 2. Nous allons continuer avec item numéro 2, affaires découlant de la réunion.
Item 2, business arising from previous meeting. Any questions or comments on this? Mrs. Bellefeuille. Yes, Mr. Chair. Is this point 2 or point 1? It's point 2. Point 2. Business arising from previous meeting. Yes. Okay. So I had a few comments to make and a few requests to make with regards to the committee. I think that we've done very good work, and there are a few elements that remain to be cleared up. And I believe with everything that we're doing, we're trying to allow for a better interpretation and better participation of MPs in both official languages. I had the privilege of attending the last liaison committee meeting where we spoke about this report that was tabled, the Parliamentary Committee expense report that was tabled at the House of Commons. And I asked a few questions, and I'm submitting these questions. I would like to know if we can make this formal request of the liaison committee and the clerk. When I saw the report, I was curious to find out how many headsets were purchased. This was not really described in the report, and this is an indicator that informs us. It tells us how many headsets were sent out to witnesses so that they would be able to testify and to be interpreted in the other official language. Also, I would like to congratulate the clerks. They've created a dashboard, and so before the appearance of witnesses, they are called. There are sound tests before their testimony, and perhaps it would be good to have a dashboard, a follow-up dashboard explaining, okay, these are new practices. These new practices seek to improve the participation of our witnesses in both official languages so that they are able to have good connectivity, correct equipment, and to be interpreted. But to be able to measure, we have to document. We have to document what's happening at each committee with each witness so that at the Board of Internal Economy, we can see if our continual improvement has succeeded or if we have to implement new means. So I would like to suggest or move to the members of the Board of Internal Economy that we could see how many headsets were purchased in this last report that was tabled today at the House. And also, could the clerks create some sort of dashboard to follow up on these new measures so that we're able to assess and ensure continual improvement? And then during the next quarter, the Board of Internal Economy will be able to have a report, and that way we can be very proud of the efforts made so that all parliamentarians are able to work in the official language of their choice and have the assurance that the interpretation will be of high quality. So this is under a business arising from the previous meeting. I don't know if my colleagues agree with my two requests. Do people agree with these requests? No one against? Mr. Jensen, do you have something to say? I know this is your department. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. de Bellefeuille. Following discussion at the Liaison Committee meeting this week, I already began discussion with my team and also with Stéphane Arbé. Yes, we will be able to provide statistics to the Liaison Committee and to the Board of Internal Economy with regards to headsets, and also, as you suggested, some sort of dashboard allowing to measure the number of incidents, and we hope that we will see a reduction of them and that the statistics will show a reduction of incidents following the new processes in place. So yes, absolutely, we can do that. Thank you so much. Thank you. Anything else?
Tout le monde est d'accord avec numéro 3?
Everyone is in agreement with number 3, so we can proceed. With number 2, rather, sorry. Now, number 4. Number 4.
Richards, please. I believe you're on mute. No, Mr. Richards, you're on mute. We haven't heard a thing.
Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted, but maybe someone else was trying to unmute me at the same time I was doing it, and we counteracted each other. But anyway, while we're on the topic of interpretation, might be a good time to raise the point I wanted to raise as well. As you know, Speaker, and I'm sure others are aware, I'd raised the point of privilege in the House about this issue, and you didn't find a prima facie case, but it doesn't mean it isn't an issue, and one that maybe we should discuss. And it centers around the resources that are available for committees. We're finding that committees are being prevented from continuing in their meetings or finishing items of business that they're needing to finish, particularly when there ends up being a filibuster or something like that. We even had it go so far that we had one day where there was only the one meeting occurring, and yet there were still not resources available, apparently. So I think we do need to have a discussion about this and about how we might find ways to ensure that those resources can be available. Or are there other, and maybe it's a question for some of our folks in administration, is there ways that we can find to address these things so we don't have these things occurring? I mean, whether it was considered a breach of privilege or not, it certainly is problematic to the workings of Parliament when a committee is prevented from continuing its work based on lack of interpretation available or rooms or things like that. So is there something we could do to be looking at ways to focus in the resources or bring in new resources to help address these challenges? I'm not sure if there's someone there that is able to address those points, but I think it's something we do need to have a conversation about.
I believe Mr. Patrice and Mr. Gagnon have some comments on that. But first, if it's okay, we'll go to Mr. Julian first. He may have some points and they can answer all the questions at once. Mr. Julian.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. President.
Thank you. And I agree with Mrs. de Bellefeuille and Mr. Richards. I agree with what they've said. It's a problematic. We are a country that ensures equality of both official languages at the committees, yes, but we have to have access to interpretation resources at all time. We have employees that are extremely dedicated and they do great work. But there's a lack of resources. There's a huge lack of resources, and this has been identified. I think we are now at a critical point. We're close to a third wave of the pandemic, according to all predictions that are being made. This means that virtually, we will have to have the virtual resources in place so that parliamentarians can continue their work. I think that we're at a critical point. I think it's an important point that was raised, and we need to respond. We need the necessary resources in order to ensure that our employees are well treated, that technically there's no workplace safety, workplace health and safety issues for them, and that committees be able to meet with the necessary resources in order to conduct the business of the House. For all these reasons, I am also highlighting the importance of responding to this need, this urgent need. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Gagnon, would you like to respond to the questions that have been asked? Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Richards, Mr. Julian.
speaker's ruling on the events in the health committee that had led to the question of privilege raised by Mr. Richards. There was a protocol that was shared with all of the parties that would essentially guide the administration in respect to requests from committees, either to pursue.
Monsieur le Président, point d'ordre. Juste
I would like to say that the interpreter is telling me that Mr. Gagnon is not doesn't have his headset properly positioned. It's difficult for him to hear. Could I please indicate if you're using Skype on your computer and Skype is on in the background, this creates technical problems. I see this with my computer. If I have Skype on in the background and Zoom, there's interference between the two. So can you look on your computer and see if Skype is this is just an extra thing, a piece of information for you all. I'm going to go back to Mr. Gagnon. Hopefully he will reposition his microphone and continue. Mr. Gagnon.
On l'a perdu complètement.
We completely lost him? Where is he?
Monsieur le Président?
Ah, OK. Monsieur Gagnon?
Oui.
OK. Vous êtes gelé. Votre photo est gelée, mais on vous entend bien. Continuez, s'il vous plaît.
Oh, d'accord. Je suis désolé.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the situation. I think I was talking about protocols that were shared with the different parties in order to manage different requests that could be made with regards to extending. The sound has been cut. We don't hear you at all. You seem to have technical issues.
OK, peut-être on va passer ça à Monsieur Patrice.
Mr. Patrice in the room. And let's hope that we get him back online. Thank you. Without trying to assume what Andre was going to say, and he can continue on his previous idea. This issue of resources is quite concerning with regards to administration, and we are having discussions. We've stepped up discussions with our partners to try to assess and determine the extent to which we can add committee times for meetings when the House is in session. With regards to resources and committee activities, there has been a considerable increase since November. If we look at the statistics and the figures, I can definitely share this with the members. The use rate of the time blocks is at an unequaled level if we compare with the previous years. So the House administration with their partners is doing everything possible to respond to the MPs' needs and to provide the time blocks that you need. With regards to the weeks where the House is not sitting, I would like to indicate that the issues around resources.
The meeting, when there was only one committee meeting, we should have supported that committee. It was a miscommunication, I'm going to say, that occurred, and we owned that mistake, and the protocol will no doubt avoid the situation like that reoccurring. But in the non-sitting week, there's definitely more availability of sitting time, whether it's for committees or association, because the utilization rate of those weeks are not as high as during sitting week.
Is there any other questions or comments? Questions et commentaires? Okay.
Questions or comments? Can we go to the next item on the agenda?
4, the extension of certain temporary COVID-19 measures to the fiscal year 2021-2022. And we'll go to Monsieur Paquette, Chief Financial Officer. Monsieur Paquette?
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. This presentation follows up on the analysis with respect to temporary measures in effect due to COVID-19 that was presented to the board last December. At that meeting, the House Administration advised the board that we would continue to monitor the use of those various policies and the expenses that members were incurring and how they were to evolve, and that we would then return here to the board for any recommendations, if any were needed. I must note also that these temporary measures are all set to expire on March 31st, 2021. Nous avons observé que l'utilisation de ces mesures
We've observed that the use of these temporary measures has been sustained since the last analysis that I presented in December. Despite the pandemic, MPs continue to provide services to constituents, and following our consultations, we understand that it is necessary to prolong these measures for an extended period of time.
To the board as part of the measures taken to address and mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic, approved to extend the temporary measures through March 31st, 2022. These temporary measures include the purchase of consumables, items to ensure that COVID-19 preventive measures are in place in constituency offices, and increase the advertising limit to communicate with constituents. So, Mr. Speaker, this concludes my presentation. I'm open for any questions the members may have.
Do we have any questions or comments? Mr. Julian, and then Mr. Richards.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank Mr. Paquette and the House Administration. I certainly support the extension of these measures. In our case, in downtown New Westminster, where my constituency office is, those measures have allowed us to put up plexiglass panels, which protect our employees. We're in a very high traffic area in the downtown area. And so even though our office is largely functioning virtually, when constituents do need to come in, my staff are protected. And I think these measures have been sensible. They've been effective, allowing members of parliament to make the important adjustments that come with this pandemic. The new variants of COVID-19 are worrisome, as we all know, and many are predicting a third wave coming this spring. And so it makes sense, I believe, that we extend the measures so that members of parliament, their employees can be protected, they can continue to serve their constituents in a way that protects everybody.
Very good. Mr. Richards.
Sure, I agree. Like, I think these there's been some usage of these, take up of these. I would certainly agree with extending them. However, I guess where I would have an issue, we're talking about March 31st in terms of an extension of these. What we're hearing from the government is that by the end of September, we will have all Canadians vaccinated that want to be vaccinated. So one would assume that at that point we'll be able to make some kind of a shift in terms of Parliament moving back towards more of a normal sitting kind of in a scenario, or certainly something closer to it, and that obviously some of these measures then would no longer be needed as well. If the government does fail to sort of meet that, we could always look at extending beyond September if the government isn't able to live up to that promise that they've made. But if that's the case, we should be able to see some change in these things in September. So perhaps what we should do is set the date at being September for the renewal right now, and we can always look at it again if needed in September.
OK. Nous allons aller à Madame de Bellefeuille, suivie par Monsieur.
Mrs. de Bellefeuille. Thank you. I do not share the opinion of my colleague, the Conservative member. I agree with the proposal that was submitted. The fact that it would be put back to March 31st, 2022. This is a fiscal year, a budget cycle. I think it's important for MPs to be able to, on April 1st, to budget to be able to put amounts in their budget planning, and I think it's logical. I think it makes sense to extend this to March 31st, 2022. I would find it a bit curious to tell MPs, well, be careful with your budgets because these temporary measures will be okay until September. There are some measures in there, such as advertising, that it can be part of planning. We know that the pandemic is not affecting each province in the same way, in a similar way. And I think that the proposal that has been made here does, rather is very logical. When I look at the statistics and the results, it doesn't seem to be more expensive for the administration of the House. We seem to be saving in some regards to be able to fund this. I think it's respectful of the MPs who want to plan their budget for the following year. I also think that parliamentary type decisions, whether it be effective at the end of September, I think that is logical, but not this proposal. So I support what Mr. Julian has said in his agreement with the proposal made here, and I encourage members of the committee to join. We'll continue with Mr. Deltel, then Mr. Leblanc, and Mrs. Petitpas-Taylor. Thank you. I think that we also have to understand that we've all gone through this in our constituencies. Most of the huge infrastructure expenses have already been done, and that's normal. And yes, perhaps we do have to adjust, but most of the expenses have already been made. I think that to be able to adjust that in function of September, I think that's very coherent with what we're determining here in the House. We are extending this till September, so in a 6-month period, and then we're able to adjust when we see that there's still a need. I think that there will be no problem if we look to November. We've already made most of these expenditures, and this is coherent with our work in the House. And I think to look at this in a block of 6 months makes sense. And there might be a third wave of the pandemic, and no one is sheltered from this. We'll be able to come back and renew the extension without any issue. Mr. Leblanc? Thank you. I would have agreed with Mrs. de Bellefeuille and Mr. Julian.
Mr. Paquette's recommendation. I get Blake comments if the government fails to vaccinate people by the end of September. I get all of that. That should maybe be reserved for question period. And I think we have to be careful. The idea that certain public health requirements, as Mr. Julian said, to protect the staff that work for us or protect constituents that may visit constituency offices, some of those decisions, as advised by public health officers, may be separate and apart from the vaccination schedule. So I think I wouldn't suggest that this committee has views on appropriate public health measures. I would suggest that those decisions that MPs need to make to protect the people that work with us and constituents who visit us would coherently be subsumed in a financial year. And that's why I would have accepted the recommendation as put forward by Monsieur Paquette and as endorsed by Mr. Julian and Madame de Bellefeuille.
Okay, nous allons continuer. We'll go on to Madame Petitpas-Taylor, suivie par Madame de Bellefeuille. Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I will be very brief. I'm just wondering if we know how many offices have required a deep cleaning as a result of COVID exposure within their offices. And I guess when asking that question, I'm also wondering, do we have a workplace health and safety protocol in place in the event of a workplace COVID exposure?
First question, Monsieur Paquette.
I'll for the health and safety, I'll transfer that to our ACHRO. She's the one responsible for the health and safety programs.
Merci, Danielle. Yes, we do have that information. I don't have it at hand right now, but I absolutely will follow up and make sure that the members of the board get the information requested.
Okay, I believe Monsieur Patrice has an answer for that, for part of that question anyways. Monsieur Patrice?
Yeah, up to this time, there's been no expenditure submitted for deep cleaning of an office. And then for the protocol, we'll provide that information to the board.
Maintenant, nous allons continuer avec Madame de Bellefeuille et... OK. Oui, s'il vous plaît.
Mrs. de Bellefeuille. Thank you. So if the position of our colleagues, our Conservative colleagues, does not change, and as we know, the tradition is to try to reach a consensus, and with my mediator training, perhaps I have a compromise to suggest. The recommendation that we have before us includes 7 recommendations, in fact. And if I understand my colleagues, and recommendations 1, 2, and 3 is concerning for them, more specifically, because this is linked directly to contamination, decontamination, and the purchasing of material. If we look at 4, 5, 6, and 7, this is linked to the work that's done by members in their community, support organizations providing essential services so that they can do some type of promotion of their services, so do some work for local community organizations, food banks, etc. And so if you agree as a compromise, perhaps we could agree at least on 4, 5, 6, and 7. In my opinion, it would be very logical to approve this for the following year. And then if 1, 2, and 3 is concerning, perhaps together we could look at withdrawing that from the proposal, but keeping 4, 5, 6, and 7. This is my counter proposal so that we can reach a compromise or a consensus.
Merci.
Thank you.
Monsieur
That
Mr. Julian.
seems reasonable, frankly. My concerns were that, obviously we're talking about putting in place measures that, would be related to COVID. And if in fact we expect the population to be all vaccinated by September, those would be measures that would no longer be needed. So, and I think what we're talking about here then, Claude, is some of the advertising and things like that. And that was where your concerns were, that people be able to plan ahead for things like that. I think that's actually a sensible compromise for sure, and one that I think would satisfy me that we're not going to have measures in place that would no longer be needed beyond September.
Okay, I believe Mr. Julian has a comment as well. Mr. Julian?
Merci, Monsieur le Président, mais
Thank you. I appreciate what Mrs. Bellefeuille is presenting as a compromise. When we look at healthcare, we hear quite clearly that we won't be out of the woods for another year yet. So we can talk about vaccination dates, projected vaccination dates, but I really don't think that this should be part of what we're deciding here today, that we really should decide to implement all the possible measures to protect the public, to protect our employees, and to continue our parliamentary work. For this reason, I fully support the recommendations that are being made by Mr. Paquette and the House administration. And as Mrs. de Bellefeuille, I do understand that we are an entity where we try to work with a consensus basis. So I'm prepared to support her proposal. But to say that we are going to be out of this in September, well, I hope so, but I really don't think so. And when we look at all the projections, especially with the new variants that are emerging, unfortunately, we can be another year before we are out of this pandemic. Mrs. de Bellefeuille. So, Mr. Chair, allow me to summarize my proposal. It is that the elements 1, 2, and 3 be extended up until September the 30th, and points 4, 5, 6, 7 extended up until March 31st, 2022. So our committee could sit in August, for example, to assess if 1, 2, and 3 should be extended past September the 30th. It's not because I'm suggesting this compromise that I agree with the fact that it may not be necessary, but given the way that we work at this committee, I think it's an acceptable compromise. Also, it gives us a way of reassessing the recommendation 1, 2, and 3 sometime in August or before September. So this is a summary of my proposal. Is everyone in agreement? Do we have a consensus?
Oui, nous avons des pouces à l'air.
Yes? Great. 1, 2, and 3 will be reviewed. It will go until September 30th, 4, 5, 6, 7, March 31st. Agreed? Okay, so let's continue. Number 5.
The quarterly financial report for the third quarter of 2020-2021. Again, we have Monsieur Paquette who will be making the presentation. Monsieur Paquette.
Oui, merci encore, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you once again. Thank you once again. This is a third quarterly financial report. Quarterly financial reports compare cumulative financial data for the fiscal year underway as well as that of the same quarter for the year prior. As for the reports of the quarters 1 and 2 already presented, we continue to compare two atypical years. So the pandemic has had an impact on our spending trends. During the prior year, it was a general election year. So our comparisons will be influenced by atypical spending that you've probably already seen in our reports. If we look at the report as of December 31st, amounts approved for the fiscal year 2020-2021, $539 million. There's been no changes to our approvals since the second quarterly report that I presented in December. As of December 31st, total expenses $344.2 million. This represents a reduction of $6.2 million or 1.8% compared to expenses during the prior year.
In expenditures relates to the continuing decrease in travel as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Decreases have also been seen in the areas of training and hospitality across the whole organization, as well as the reduction in temporary help services for members and House officers, also all as a result of the COVID-19. The temporary closure of some of the food service facilities and the printing facilities earlier in the year has led to reduced costs of materials and supplies, which has been partially offset by the purchase of consumable items such as face masks and hand sanitizers that are used across the House of Commons. Expenditures for computers, office equipment, furniture, and fixture has also decreased, primarily though to the changes in the timing of some of our life cycling activities. And this decrease was partially offset by the cost incurred for the purchases to support virtual House proceedings and committees, and by costs incurred for equipment that enabled the House administration employees to work remotely during this COVID pandemic. On the other hand, expenditures for salaries and benefits have increased mainly due to additional spending on members' employee salaries and the cost of living increases for members and House administration staff. These increases have been partially offset by the reduction in number of employees for members and House officers, delays in some of the staffing, and reduction in part-time costs and overtime as a result of the pandemic. Finally, the report does provide a comparison of the utilization of our authorities, which shows a decrease of 3.4%, which is not unexpected given the current situation. Also, given this current situation surrounding COVID-19 pandemic, we are closely monitoring and considering any potential savings, as well as any financial impact that may have an impact on our funding decisions due to this truly unexceptional year. So, Mr. Speaker, this concludes my presentation. Je suis disponible pour répondre aux questions des membres.
Do we have any?
I'm available to take questions.
Oh. C'est très clair. Okay, est-ce qu'on...
It's very clear. Can we continue? Everyone is in agreement? Okay. We're going to take a few moments to now go in camera. Two-minute break.